Welcome to this second screencast of Thinkin Tags, and in this screencast I want to show you how to create your HTML with the drag and drop features of the application. I am in the dashboard and here's my test project from the last screencast, and I open it and open as well the index.html. And in the last screencast I included a small heading, and in the first step I want to remove this because I want to show you the drag and drop features of the application here. So now the body is empty again, and we can start creating our layout using the CSS framework. Therefore I go to the markup section of the application, and as you can see, the application switches the view mode from the former live view to the structure mode. The structure mode makes it much easier to select structural elements like the body element or any div or header or footer element, because every of these structural elements get a menu bar. Like you can see here, I can click on it, so it's much easier to select them even if they are nested. In the markup section you will find the element browser in the left panel. Within the element browser you find several groups of elements that can be dropped into the layout. As you can see here, these elements are recently disabled, so I can click on them but I can't drag them into the layout. To do this within Thinkin Tags, you have to do a first step, and this is to select any structural element to transform it into a drop zone. And when an element is selected, like the body element, then these elements get enabled, and as you can see here, when I hover the mouse over the body element, it gets green. So this tells you this is an active drop zone, and I can release my mouse button and the heading drops into the layout. So this was an example to show you how drag and drop works in Thinkin Tags, but I want to create a layout, and that's why I removed the heading again from the body. When I created my project, I selected YAML as my code base, and that's why I find here the typical layout modules of the CSS framework, and I will use them to create my layout now. I start by putting first full page block into the layout. This is a wrapper from the YAML framework, and the application asks me for an ID, and this will be the header element. And as you can see here, Thinkin Tags drops several containers into the layout. That's why the application knows this framework and knows these modules that can be quite complex, and so we have more elements than only a simple div here. The next one is the nav container, and we need a main part of our website. No, sorry, not nav. This should be main, create, and the last wrapper will be my footer. Now I've dropped 4 full page blocks into the layout, but the application created much more div elements, and it's not really to be seen what I've created so far. So I'm moving to the screen layout section, and there is in the left panel the layout properties dialog, where I can configure my layout. I can set up the layout width as well as the alignment. So I want to create a flexible layout, and that's why I set up the maximum width to 80 EM. And as you can see here, the wrapper element changes immediately to this maximum width. And I want a centered layout, and again, the application updates the layout immediately. Okay, this looks quite nice so far. And in the next step, I want to include horizontal navigation to the layout, and I want to configure my content area. So for including the navigation, I switch back to the markup section, and I will place it here in this container YM wrapper, and there's another container from the full page block YM VBox that I don't need right now, and that's why I go to the context menu and remove it, delete, and now I select the YM wrapper element as the drop zone, take the navigation and drop it into the layout. Now I want to set up the main content area, and I want to create a 2-column layout with a single content column and a sidebar, and that's why I'm choosing a YAML grid module and put it into the layout. So when the grid element is dropped into the layout, Thinkin Tags creates a default grid with 2 columns, each one 50% wide. And to configure this grid, you can click on the grid wrapper, YM grid, and in the bottom of the working area you'll find now a grid settings dialog where you can modify the column width. You can also change the amount of columns. You can switch to a 3-column width or even 4 columns like this one, and it always changes immediately in the layout. But now I want to switch back to my 2-column layout, and I choose a setup of 2/3 for the content and 1/3 for my sidebar. So this is quite nice, and I think it's a really comfortable way to configure the grid. And now I want to put some content into the layout so we can see what we've created so far. I'm starting with the header, and I want to include a title for my website. That's why I'm clicking on the YM VBox container, and now I could easily drop a heading into this container to include my title. But this time I want to show you a more precisely way to use the drag and drop feature within Thinkin Tags. When I dropped my full page blocks, header, nav, main and footer into the layout, they were always appended as last childs to the body element. To determine more precisely where an element should be included into the layout, you can switch to the linearized view mode of Thinkin Tags. The linearized view mode shows the recent DOM structure and every element in it in their source order. So here we have the body element, the header and its children, and now you can click on any element, and as you can see, now the application includes or creates drop zones right before and after each of their child elements. So in this mode you can decide if a drop element should be included into the layout right before a child or directly after it. So let's demonstrate it with my heading. I'm dropping this into the container YM VBox, and right after the element is included in the layout, the application immediately creates 2 new drop zones before and after my heading, and that's why this mode is much more precisely to define where new elements should be included into the layout. Let's go back to the structure view mode, and here we are, and now I have my title in the header, and now I want to include some elements into my content area, and that's why I have to select this container as a target for my drop elements, and now I have this active drop zone and can drop a heading and some paragraphs here, and another paragraph, a subheading there, and 2 more paragraphs. Then I choose the sidebar, and again I can now add some more elements, a list, another subheading, and let's drop another unsorted list. That's all. Now I want to add a small copyright note to the footer, and here I want to show you that also in the structure view mode you have access to the internal HTML editor by clicking on the edit element HTML in the context menu, and now here we are, and I will include copyright 2013 Thinkin Tags, and this should be a paragraph, so I add these tags here. That's fine, and insert. The last thing I want to show you in this screencast is the way how you can manipulate the source order of elements within the visual workflow of Thinkin Tags. Therefore I click on the body element that has 4 child containers that are the header, the nav container, the container main, and the footer. And when you take a look at their menu bars, you notice they have become shaded when I selected the body element. And when I move my mouse above the menu bars, you can see that the cursor becomes a cross. So this cross indicates that these containers are now draggable. So now I can click on the menu bar of the header element and drag it around, as well as all other containers here. And so it's really easy to configure the source order of these children. There's only one limitation here, so you can't move any of these children out of their parent. I'm now at the end of the screencast that introduced you with the basic drag and drop functionality of Thinkin Tags. There will be another screencast that will introduce you to the DOM manipulation features of the application. But for now, thanks for watching and have much fun playing around with Thinkin Tags. Bye bye.